Ahmad, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a film director as a start, and then
Ah,
that changed to anything that has to do with the medical field, actually.
really?
Um, yes. And then when I was in high school, it was the beginning of the genetic engineering trend. And I was really good in biology, physics, chemistry, math. I was very good in school and scientific programs. So I actually applied and got accepted to do genetic engineering in Manchester. But then few things in life happened and I had to switch majors in general. Yeah.
And what did you switch to?
So at the time, the only available program was hospitality management. So I
Okay.
did that. I did study that for 3 years. And by the end of it, I decided that this is not something I want to do. Fortunately, I have a very supportive brother. He was willing to help me try something new. And I was like, I'm going to go into something that I have no idea about, which is design. I was
Mm.
always influenced by architecture, but like not design. And the reason I went to design and not architecture is because it was a shorter program in school. I remember going to my first interview at the department and they said, show us your portfolio. And I said, what is that? I had no idea what a portfolio means. I've never sketched in my life. I
Mm.
used to draw as a kid, but that's part of, every kid's growing up in school and stuff like that. They basically said, we'll have you in on probation.
Mm.
And I like a challenge. So I took it and 3 years later, graduated top of my class.
Wow. Well, how do you think those dreams of being a film director and then was it a bioengineering?
Genetics.
Genetics.
Yeah.
How do you think that ties to what you do today?
Film director is something that's very visual and you're creating a world that's based on a story or that's based on a set of circumstances. So it does tie a lot to what I do. There is that element of you want to create a space for people, you want to create an experience, you want to create drama, you want to create moments of refuge. Like, how do people relate to things is
Mm.
very personal. You want to answer certain questions in unconventional ways sometimes. Like certain colors could mean to some people calmness, or it reminds them of home, or it reminds them of something nostalgic and romantic. Same color can be very frustrating for other people. So even though there is the general study of color theory, there is also the personal experiences of what every end user has. I've always been a big fan of music. I'm really bad with names, be it with music or artwork, but like I know a lot of music. I listen to a lot of music. And that's another kind of romantic element, if you want, that is very necessary in film or the movie industry,
Mm.
be it in a romantic way or not. But like it adds something
Mm.
in spaces. We see a lot of spaces that they do a sound installation within just to make you
Ah.
live the experience even more. That's for the film director part. On the other side of the brain, like the scientific part, it is very important actually. The whole experience of being very much into science and physics and chemistry, I think it also affects what I do
Mm.
because understanding the physics, the geometry, the shapes, and how they relate to each other and how things interact with each other. And maybe this is a bit more philosophical than what you actually experience in life. But like chemistry is all about how different things interact with each other and like the
Mm.
result and all of it. And maybe deep down in my head, I think about these two materials sitting next to each other or not. But it's also like very logical and it has to be right. It has to be very technical and logical to be right. And I always tell my clients, first and foremost, your space has to be functional.
Mm.
My job is to make it beautiful. That's my
Mm.
job. But my goal is to make it functional for you because if it's not, you're not going to like it. It's like a beautiful pair of shoes.
Mm.
If they're not comfortable, you're not going to wear them. You will hate wearing them, actually,
Yeah.
right? You will
Yeah.
wear them because you spent money to buy them and you took the effort to do it and get them. But you will just not enjoy them. You will hate them. And over time, you'll stop wearing them. So
Mm.
it has to be very functional as a stepping stone of a project.
Mm.
And then the aesthetic is the extra layers. That's where I come in and start adding that input as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love the way you just talked about that. That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
And I took notes as you were talking, and I loved how you weaved in the chemistry piece to the design piece.
Yeah.
So you switched majors, you went into design, you graduated top of your class. Did you start right away, right after school? How did you get to the point where you're doing this as a full-time job?
As a full-time job. I'm very short-term goal oriented. Growing up, I had so much instability in different areas in my life that it made me realize that I cannot plan 10 years ahead. I should plan what the next step is. I should always be prepared for the next step. And I should also be prepared for the disappointment that might come with it, be it achieving it and not fulfilling what I thought it would fulfill, or not even achieving it in the first place, because both are disappointment. And I learned that that experience was really informed by not being able to do genetic engineering, because I got accepted in school. I started preparing to leave Lebanon to go to Manchester, and that's when it happened that I couldn't go. And I just learned that, okay, you can't really plan things way ahead, just given where you are in life at the moment. So one of my biggest goals was actually to work at the top design firms in Lebanon as soon as I graduate. And I did my internships during school, which I had to do at really some of the biggest design firms in Lebanon. I think the reason was because I was really insisting on joining these firms, and I kept like calling and sending emails and even showing up at the door. So I'm like, I just want to understand. I'm not forcing myself in. I want to understand what qualifies me to at least land an interview. And I think that persistence showed people that I'm not saying you have to hire me. I'm just coming to say, tell me what do I need to bring in as a set of skills to qualify for the interview. So that's my gateway. And I ended up landing 2 out of 3 of the big ones that I wanted. That gave me a push during my education. Once I graduated, I applied to a design job at an architecture firm in Lebanon. And I remember going to the interview. They were not very impressed because I was coming from the smaller university. It is an American University of Science and Technology in Lebanon, but it's not as big as the Lebanese American University or the American University of Beirut. And I picked up on that. I had a good portfolio. I had based on all of it, but then I picked up on it. And when it got to the point where I was asked, what salary are you expecting? I basically gave them a number that covers my transportation only for a full-time job. I remember my employer's face was like, wait, what? And he goes, that doesn't even cover your transportation. I said, actually, it does. I've done my research. And he was like, okay, so like, are you okay with it? I said, yeah, because I want to work here.
Wow.
And he was like, okay, you're hired. And they actually, which never happens, they offered me more than I asked for, right? Because I think by law, they couldn't offer me that number anyway. So I felt good about getting more than I wanted. Like there was that small accomplishment that I knew it was a big compromise. But to me, it was an extension of my training. It was an extension of my education to qualify to becoming a better designer. And what I also knew very well is that having a career with this specific firm is going to open doors for me. And it did. So I just from there, I worked for a year. I resigned at the end of the year. And they asked me why. And we had an exit interview, and it was very interesting. And part of it was, of course, the financial part, which was like a joke at the time. But then also part of it was I took on so much more than just interior design. Because it's an architecture firm, I worked on architecture projects. I worked on landscape. I worked on furniture design. And I worked on interior design. So I had a set of things that I wanted to improve. They had a set of expectations of me, and we decided that I should stay. And I did. But also the firm had the highest profile people in the Middle East as clients.
Wow.
So we're talking back in 2007 when $10 million homes in Lebanon was very rare, and the firm would not sign a project unless it's a minimum of $10 million. So we were working on $30 and $40 million homes.
Wow.
So we were talking completely different caliber than what I also grew up around. I realized that to me as a designer and as a person, it should not be okay that a sofa should be $100,000 because no, this is not how I was raised. This is not the majority of people. So when I switched, I decided to go to a smaller firm that has a wider variety of clients and clientele. And they also did commercial projects. And I joined them and it was great. Yeah. I was employed from 2007 until 2000, I would say 15.
Mm.
I took different jobs. I learned a lot. One of them was actually in Washington, D.C. as well. One of them was in one of the best lighting design firms in the world that happens to be Lebanese owned and based in Lebanon. We've done projects for star architects, Pete Boone and Vincent Van Duysen and India Mahdavi. So I got to experience all of that. It just kept feeding me so much. And they were all boutique firms, even though they were like top performers, they were all boutique firms. It showed me also how you can have a very successful business without having 200 employees.
Mm.
You don't have to be corporate. You can be small and just be super successful if you define what you want to do and how you want it and who you want to cater to as well as your clients.
There's so much I want to explore, Ahmad, in that story. Maybe I'll start. You mentioned there was instability growing up.
Yes, that's right.
And then you mentioned how you were so persistent. So,
that's right.
And that's so inspiring. I think listeners listening are going to be really inspired by that. You said, I don't want you to just give me a job. I want to get an understanding of the skill set I need to be able to work here. There's something very inspiring about that. There's something very, just really beautiful about that. How did that persistence come about? You mentioned instability. I imagine there must be something tied to that. How did that shape you into who you are? How did you know to do that? Was it the love of design? Because a lot of people would say, they said, no, I'm just going to go back and give up.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, that's right.
You didn't.
So the instability in my life started, I was really young. I went through a phase where it was heavy on me, or it was something that made me feel sorry for myself or my family or all of it. The older I grew, the more I learned in life, the more I realized that actually made me who I am today. And I'll give you one quick example. I switched schools every single year. I'm not one of the people who has long-term friends from school. I have friends in my life that I've had for 25 years now, and I love them and I speak to them every single day. But doesn't mean I grew up just like any normal upbringing in that sense, that you go to the same school for 5 years, or even my siblings went to the same school for longer years than I did. Many things in life are not going to stay as they are. And maybe I didn't think about all these things as a kid, but the older I get, I do meditation every now and then. I have done some therapy at some point in my life. You meet people, you talk, you explore about yourself more through talking to people.
Yeah.
And so I realized that all of these changes as a kid had an impact on me one way or another. And it wasn't that I had to prove myself. Actually, my family spoiled me a lot as a child. Even though we didn't have, I don't come from a rich family, they spoiled me a lot. If I wanted something, they will do the best they can to make it happen for me. So I'm very, very fortunate and grateful for that. That gave me an understanding that even though you want things in life, doesn't mean you're going to get it just because you want it. Why are you getting these things? My mom was always very strict when it comes to education. Because she taught us that this is the only thing that will help you in life. This is the only thing that you will acquire, and it stays with you, and it's up to you what you do with it. And because of that, she was never easy when it comes to like, if you get an A minus, it means you can get an A. Like that was the answer. It's not that, oh, great, you got an A minus, let's celebrate that. It means you can get an A. And if you got the A, you can get the A plus. Once you get the A plus, that's when we celebrate. Because she kept pushing us, whether she knew or not that we had potential. In her mind, that's her job as a mom, as a single mom, actually. Just keep pushing more. That taught me a lot about, okay, this is the end goal. At this moment in time, the end goal is to do this. Now, to get to that point, what do I need to do? Because it will not be handed over to me. I have to do something to achieve that. And that's why I said, the outcome is one of three, which is kind of unfair also. It's the joy of getting it, or the disappointment of getting it and not meeting your expectations, or the disappointment of not getting it at all. So it's one out of three that you're going to be happy about it as well. But you're still putting the work and you're still putting the effort, and it's totally worth it. Totally worth it. When it's reasonable, I guess that's a big part of how it informed my behavior and my perception of like how I approach things in life.
Right before we started the interview, Ahmad mentioned that he lives in Manhattan in New York. How did you go from living in Lebanon, working in Lebanon, to New York City? You mentioned DC in the middle of that. I imagine that must have been a big move.
Yes, it has. So my family moved to the States back in early 2000s. I am of Palestinian descent, and I've always been a refugee in my life. My mom is from Lebanon, but we do not in the Middle East get the nationality of your mom. So you get the nationality of your father, and by extension, I am Palestinian. In the Middle East, I've always been a Palestinian refugee, which also meant that I had so many limitations to what can and cannot be done. Even though I was born in Qatar, I grew up in Lebanon, lived most of my life in Lebanon, there was still a lot of things that I did not have rights to as a refugee. So the family moved to the States, just like most immigrants, seeking a better future, seeking a better life for themselves and their kids. And then I stayed behind because I had a very good job. I just said that. I graduated, I had a very good job. The first year was really underpaid. The second year was way, way better than the first year. And I actually was one of the highest paid.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
Yes, thank you. And then every career change after that had really good financial rewards that came with it. But also I was taking on more and more in terms of what I'm doing within the firm I'm working with. And it just happened that I did meet a friend one time for dinner who lives in Washington, D.C. And he said a group of friends are coming with me. Do you mind? Like, they're all from D.C. They want to see Lebanon. I was like, of course, I'll meet with you. So I spent some time with this group and I started driving some of them, taking them places. And on their last day, one of them comes up to me. She's like, you have a very interesting taste in things. What do you do? Because it was a larger group. This is someone I didn't chat one-on-one with. And I said, I'm an interior designer. She's like, oh my God, I am an interior designer. And I was like, really? So let me take you to some art galleries. And then one of these places I took her to was the furniture showroom that my first job has opened, which I designed. It was part of the projects I had to work on under the umbrella of the company.
Yeah.
So I designed all of the furniture pieces and the showroom. And she walked in and she's like, this is mind blowing. Let's talk. And she offered me a job. She was like, are you willing to move to the States? At the time, the States to me was, okay, it looks cool, it sounds cool, but I'm doing really well here. So I really want to go to some place that I don't know. Like this, right? Speaking of comfort zones.
Yeah.
But the other part of me was like, this is very interesting and why not explore that? So I did end up saying yes to the job. And we started working remotely together because construction technique is completely different. We have the metric and the imperial system. So it's not something you just switch to overnight. So we started working remotely together and they started on the work visa as well, which the attorney said would be 4 to 6 months. And it took almost 2 years to get the work visa.
Wow.
During which, again, I had some career changes in Lebanon. I started freelancing more, doing all that stuff. And I got the work visa and I moved to DC. Fell in love with DC. This is the place that I actually call home. It's one of my favorite cities. And I had a very good job and she was great. She taught me a lot. I learned so much on site. But then unfortunately, she had to downsize at some point, a year later. And we had this conversation. I'm the last in. I should be the first out. She was very supportive because she knew it was a big move. She was willing, whatever it takes, to help me find another job, help transition my work visa. That's where my insecurities kicked in. And I'm like, no, I cannot put myself in such a big unknown, right? So I picked up the phone and called the last person I worked with in Lebanon. And I said, there's a potential I might come back to Beirut. And the first thing that he said, we would love to have you back. So that was reassuring for me. And about a month later, I moved back to Lebanon. And I worked in the same company. It was amazing. And I got the opportunity to work on freelance basis and design a boutique hotel in Qatar, knowing that I have also a degree in hospitality management. So they knew they will get the designer. Yes.
It tied in.
Exactly. They will get the designer who understands the operation as well, right? And of course, I said yes to it. I spoke with my boss and my boss was like, this would be great for you. I'll be happy for you, but we also want you on the team. So try to make it work. We did the interview. We did the meeting. Everything went great. They asked me for all the paperwork and I got a phone call on the same day that said, unfortunately, you can't get a visa because you are Palestinian. That was the first time in my life that I felt like that's it for me. This is the dead end. As someone who holds a refugee document, I'm not going to be able to grow. I'm not going to be able to go anywhere. And a few years before, I have tried to travel different places overseas, and it was very challenging as well. I remember I hung up and I picked up the phone and called my brother and I said, it's time for me to move to the US. Again, put my portfolio together, put my resume, started applying to jobs everywhere in the States. Fast forward, I landed in Houston, where we have a family house. So it was cheaper to be unemployed, and I had to go back and forth to Lebanon for a long time.
Because you were still working at the Lebanon company
at that time, when I moved to Houston, I just quit.
Oh, okay, okay. But before that, you were still working
before
at that?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
I lived in Houston and I got a job offer, and we worked with an attorney, and fortunately I was able to get my work permit very soon, and I started working. I wasn't happy living in Houston. No offense to Houston, but it was a big change. It was a huge change for me. I've always lived in a small city. I always walked everywhere. I don't like driving. I had to drive. It was a big adjustment in that sense. And then I stayed in Houston until I got my green card. That's when I decided, okay, on to the next thing now. I really wanted to go back to DC, but I don't know why. I just ended up going to New York, honestly. I just picked myself up and went to New York. I did apply to so many jobs, and I heard no responses from any design firm that I applied to. And I'm not just in New York. I remember at some point I looked at the list, and I think I have applied to more than 300 jobs in 2 weeks. Wow. So that's more than 300 cover letters. Wow. Tailored to these firms after researching them and all of it. So it was a very intense time, but that didn't stop me. I just moved to New York, took a sales job in a shoe store at the beginning. Anyone who was willing to hire me just to pay rent. From there, I walked and started going to showrooms just to see showrooms in New York and be familiar with the design scene more and more. And I took a sales job in a showroom. That was my first step in the design field in New York. I worked with the showroom for 6 months. I exceeded my sales target, my first year sales target. Competitive sales is not for me. And that was the culture of the showroom. It was competitive sales. So I decided I wanted to resign. At that time, I had joined Home Polish. I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah, I've used it before.
Okay, for whoever is listening, if they don't have any idea what Home Polish is, I used to call it the Uber for designers. It was an online platform where designers sign up, they put their portfolio, there's a screening process. They start us with a very small project. So in the meantime, I had applied, I didn't get a response, just kept pushing, sending emails. Again, what do I need to do to qualify and become a home polish designer? And it just happened by the time I resigned, I had received a response saying, we have an influx of small projects if you're willing to work on them. I said yes. I was taking projects where the design fee would probably cover my phone bill, but that's fine. I need to build the portfolio in the city. And I picked up the phone and called one of my showroom clients that had just placed an order with me. And I said, your coffee table is still on schedule, but I just wanted to inform you that by the time it's ready for delivery, I will be out of the showroom. And he said, why? I said, because it's just not a job that I can do for life. And I want to start my own business. I'm a designer and all that stuff. And he said, he's from Tennessee. And he said, I'll be in New York tomorrow. Are you at the showroom? And I said, yeah. So he came to the showroom. And of course, I told the rest of my clients the same things, but I'm mentioning him specifically because he's someone who bought one coffee table from me. He came to the showroom. We chatted a bit. He asked me to show him previous work that I've done in design. So I pulled up my laptop, showed him other firms. And he said, we just closed on an apartment in New York. Do you want to look at it? And that's how I got my first big job in New York. And it was, let's put it this way, it's a 44th floor duplex in a very high-end luxury building. And that's how we started.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. And what's coming up for me is you kept going. You didn't give up. And then I've used Home Polish in the past, and I'm thinking, oh my God, whoever got you as their designer, that's amazing, right? Like a designer who's worked at one of the top firms in Lebanon and who has all this experience, and they had the opportunity to have you as a designer. Wow.
And thank you so much.
And you were humble enough to say, hey, I'm going to do Home Polish, that you're not thinking, I'm only going to take big jobs right? You were willing to. I just want to work. Yeah.
And still, it's not just about the big job and the prestige that come with it. I truly believe that what I do in life impact people a lot. And that's something that I personally relate to a lot. Again, I came from a very modest family upbringing and I worked hard. So I understand. And I say this to all of my clients or all my potential clients. I always say, I need to know your budget. It's not because I'm using that to judge you. It's because I need to respect that number. If your budget is $1,000, if your budget is $100,000, or if it's $1 million, I will treat you equally. But if you give me that box, if you put me in that box or give me that limit, I will be able to navigate more within these two boundaries than just trying to figure things and throwing things at you that will make them feel uncomfortable. Because money is a very sensitive topic. I've seen it firsthand based on the jobs that I work with different firms. You can be one of the richest people in the world. Money is a sensitive topic. And it will always be a sensitive topic for people because we all work hard to earn a living, be it the minimum wage, middle class salary, or a very, very wealthy person. We all work hard to earn that living. And I think going and understanding that and showing people that you understand that and you respect that, you respect them for actually working this hard and being willing to spend money and invest in making their life better. That resonates with people and people appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. And I hear your the sense of purpose and passion for the work you do. Part of the reason that I started this podcast was because I wanted to interview people like you and share those stories with people who are listening. Yeah. There's people who, as a coach, I do career coaching, executive coaching, and I hear people very unhappy about the work they're doing. Yeah. They're sitting at their desk, maybe listening to this interview thinking, I don't like my job. I don't feel purpose. I don't feel passion. Yeah. And of course, we have to work to earn a living. Exactly. And I also believe, because I also come from growing up with very modest, not a lot growing up. And I also believe that there's a way we can figure out how to do something that we still found enjoyable and purpose, whatever that might be.
That's right. Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So if someone's listening thinking, I don't feel the passion and purpose that I hear in Ahmad, what would you say to that person?
It's funny you say this because I was having a conversation with a friend earlier this morning and I mentioned that I'm going to be on your podcast because I was so excited.
And, thank you.
And then he actually works in a place that he thinks is great, but he doesn't have that passion. And it's something that he repeatedly said in a good way, because this is someone I've been friends with for 22 years, when we literally call each other every day. It's something that he repeatedly said, sometimes I'm jealous of the passion you have for what you do, like that you have that fire in you. What I told him this morning is, it's not just the passion, it's not giving up. And it's understanding that as people we grow and as people we evolve. And I told him specifically is that you realize you don't have passion for what you do, but you didn't hate it. You just kept going to figure out what's the parts of it that makes you feel good about it. And it got to the point where the department he's in is the department he always wanted to be in. Doesn't mean he loves it. Doesn't mean he wakes up every morning so excited to go there. But that's the goal that he achieved. The next step that actually comes also with that department was the financial rewards that came with it. So I'm like, take this. That's a big win. That's a big win because some people don't have the passion, work in a place they don't like, and don't even have the financial reward. So take these wins and enjoy them because that ignites something in you. What everyone wants to hear is, oh, you should find that career that makes you feel passionate about and go for it. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. It just happened that I felt in design. I wanted to do genetic engineering. I was going to do genetic engineering 20 years ago. And I thought at the time, that was my passion. Who knew? I honestly had no idea I would be so happy doing what I do today. And I consider myself very, very fortunate for that. And I'm extremely grateful for it. I don't take any accomplishment so lightly. I'm very proud of myself, but at the same time, I have a sense of responsibility that this is something that is part of what I'm doing. I have to achieve. You know what I mean? Like achieving this stuff is great and should be celebrated, but it doesn't mean I have to celebrate myself all day just because I did one thing. No, because I am going to grow and I'm going to evolve and my goals will change. So again, back to the main thing. If you're really stuck in a place where you're unhappy, there's no rewards and nothing, then yes, it is time for you to start questioning yourself, questioning what brings you joy. My biggest recommendation for people is to volunteer. Because by volunteering, there's a couple of things. One, you're giving back. Giving back always feels good, always feels good. Two, you're able to explore different avenues in life. You can volunteer in a hospital, you can volunteer in a social center, you can volunteer in a park, do landscaping, you can volunteer in a school, right? In a music program. You can volunteer in so many aspects in life. There are business coaching volunteers as well. Find someone who wants to start their business. If you're an accountant, volunteer, give them some of your time. Get that good feeling reward that you will get from someone looking at you and say, oh my God, thank you so much. This is very helpful. That's a big accomplishment for you as a person. And passion doesn't come, that's another thing I kind of want to clarify, is that passion isn't always attached to a career that's part of the creative world. People think that business careers can be dull. No, I know people who are so passionate about accounting that I'm like,
yes,
but
it's
yes,
true.
that is true.
Yes,
You know, I know
100%.
people who, I know a very, very, very talented designer. She's in sales and it makes her so happy. I couldn't do sales. I was able to do it technically and sell and make money. It's not for me as a person.
Yeah.
By doing volunteer, you start learning more about yourself. You start understanding what brings you joy and what not. And once you find that, again, don't obsess about now I have to switch. Think about how do I get there? It can be a part-time job. It can be a freelance thing. It can be maybe you just stick to volunteer because your job pays you enough to live in a nice apartment and have a lifestyle that you enjoy. Good for you. Have the lifestyle, volunteer somewhere, you know, and by volunteering, you're also meeting a lot of people. You're also networking and people in the same area that is bringing you joy. And the best thing about it, if you don't like it, you can just leave. It's like one of those things. But honestly, giving back it's a great way of giving yourself a reward, not in a selfish way because you're already giving back.
Oh, I love that suggestion. And it's a way to try different things. It's a way to experiment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I agree completely. And I don't advocate for quitting your job and pursuing your passion like you hear on TV or something.
That's right.
I really think that what you said is really powerful. Try new things. What you said earlier at the beginning of the interview, the next step. What is the next step? Short term.
Yes.
A lot of the times what I've seen in client conversations is that we think we have to figure it out all before we start. I have to come up with my plan, everything behind my computer. And it doesn't really work that way. Once we start, you find out more information. Okay. And then you meet someone and then it goes to the next thing. And then you land where you're doing something you really enjoy. If you're purposeful about it, if you're intentional about it, if you keep going and you don't give up.
That's right. Yes. Again, with one focus in mind is this thing that you're doing bringing you joy? Be honest with yourself. Because at that point, especially when you're trying to go through these changes, trying to understand who you are as a person, what brings you joy, that's your focus. That is your focus. And again, it's not selfish. Because if you're unhappy, people around you are unhappy. People probably don't want to be around you as well. And listen, I'm an introvert. If I go to a networking event, I'll spot the one person I know and try to be in their eyesight as much as I can. I am an introvert, but I also understand that part of my career is networking. And it's such a tough thing for me to do and just go up to a random person and introduce myself and say all of the things that you would say in a networking event. But then I have to do it. And there are ways where I start working on myself. And there are certain areas where I'm okay, that's how I approach it. That's how you start talking. Don't make everything about yourself as well in front of people. But I'm also, you know what I mean? Inwards, focus on yourself. No one knows us better than we know ourselves. No one can help us better than we can help ourselves. That's basically all I can think of.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Ahmad. I know this is going to resonate with people. Thank you so much for being here. How can people learn more about you if people are interested in working with you potentially or following your journey? Tell us all the things.
Absolutely. So I am an interior designer and my website is projectaz.design. You can see my website to see my work. You can reach out to me there. You can also find me on Instagram. It is project.az.design. And my website and my Instagram. These are the best two channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ahmad.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.